Hey guys, it's Matty Q, and I'm here with Ranger again for finally another podcast episode, and we decided we were going to do video instead. I have an eyelash on my eye. So based off the title, you guys know what this podcast is about. We're talking about identities and like finding your like kind of personal identity and like that journey, kind of like the journey of like I guess coming out, for like another way of phrasing that, because words are hard. Ranger, do you want to take a moment to talk about the movement of Black Lives Matter?
Yes, guys. So, as you guys have watched our previous little mini-sode, I guess you could call it, we are supporters of Black Lives Matters. The protests are still going on, regardless of what Twitter, the media, Facebook is showing you. They are still going on, and they still need all of our support, guys. So please still make sure, if you can, if you have the money, donating to Black Lives Matters and the various charities that are involved in it. And just getting involved in whatever ways you can, even if that's just educating yourself, educating others, things of that nature. Because this is a really important movement, a very important human rights movement, in fact. And it needs everybody's support. The more support it has, the better.
And then we also will have links again in the description for donation links for Black Lives Matter and all that good stuff. Same ones that were in our like I guess like mini-sode, as like Ranger likes to call it. But we're gonna let that hush now. Well, not hush, but we're gonna move on to the actual topic, I guess, of this podcast. We have a list of definitions that we will just run through for different like labels or identities that you may identify with being a queer person, excuse me. So we have lesbians, which is like like a woman relationship, attraction to the ladies. And then you have like gay, which is a man and man thing, attraction to men or masculinity, like lesbian could be just seen as attracted to femininity as well. And then transgender, which these are all definitions that I found online while looking at multiple things. So again, some of this, a lot of sexualities and genders are up to interpretation and how someone chooses to identify with them and whatnot. But with transgender, your gender is not represented by your birth gender assigned at birth. Pansexual, attraction to the spectrum. So kind of like you're attracted to everyone pretty much. And then there's also polysexual, which is a little new thing to me. It's similar to pansexual, but a little less inclusive, I believe. So I think it's kind of like a very much so like a middle ground between bisexuality and pansexuality. I think. Please do not come for me. Polysexual is a really new term that I can't find. I wasn't able to find a lot of research on. And then we have asexual, which is no sexual attraction or desire. With that can also be a sex repulsion, but that is not always the case for everyone who identifies as asexual. Then under the asexual spectrum, we have gray asexual, which is sexual attraction or desire on occasion. So you're not completely against sex or lacking of sexual desire or attraction like you may be if you're just straight up asexual. But you may have random spurts of like, hey, I'm kind of in the mood. Sorry.
More sporadic.
Or sporadic, yeah. And then you have demi-asexual, which is sexual attraction or desire when there's a connection between a person. So basically, if you have a strong connection, at least for me and how I feel, it's kind of a platonic or romantic attraction type of thing, or that is very fluid, I think, though, and it depends on the person, but it is a connection, romantic or depending on the person. Then on the flip side of that, we have aromantic, which is experiencing no sex or no romantic attraction. Then we have gray romantic, which is only experiencing romantic connection on occasion, so kind of like gray sexuality, but this is all romantic side of things. Oh my god, okay. And then we have demi-romantic, which is only experiences romantic attraction after developing an emotional connection with someone. Ranger, you want to go and do the other half?
Sure. After that, we have intersex, which is people that are born with several variations of sex, or sex characteristics, I should say. We also have non-binary, which has several different kind of like subcategories to it. But non-binary don't identify with masculine or feminine. they're considered outside the binary. But the couple of the variations on this is genderqueer, where they don't subscribe to conventional gender distinctions. Two-spirited, which is third gender. This is something particular to Native American people, where they embrace both the masculine and the feminine spirit. Gender fluid, which is someone who doesn't identify with a fixed gender. So, like, at some days they may feel more like the masculine, others more feminine, so on and so forth. Then you have demi boys that their gender identity leans more on the masculine side. Demi girls, of course, being that they lean more towards the feminine side. Then you have agender, someone who doesn't identify with a particular gender at all. Then you have androphile and gynophile, which androphile is attraction to masculinity. Gynophile, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing these right. It's attraction to femininity. And then, of course, you have queer, which is the umbrella term, or a umbrella term for sexual and gender identities.
And we're aware that there might be some sexualities or gender identities that we did not include, or that maybe your definition of a certain sexuality or gender might vary a little bit than the one that we gave here. This is what we just felt like covering in all of these, is like, because we're talking about identities and stuff like this. These are people's identities, you know? And so, yeah, just like take all of these, I guess, a little bit of a grain of salt. These are like kind of the textbook definitions, but again, to each their own. And just because you may be someone who is maybe technically gender fluid by definition doesn't mean that you can't choose to identify as like genderqueer, non-binary. That label just resonates a little bit more with yourself.
And these, like you said, these are all very textbook definitions. There's a lot of nuances to all of these that we aren't going into, because that'd be 5 podcasts all on its own, probably, if we went into all the nuances and the little nitty-gritty details on all of them.
Yeah, but these are kind of the big names, I guess, in a way, because I do know there's probably like smaller variations within some of these, or like ones that are just less common. If there are, let us know in the comments if there's one we missed.
Yeah.
Or if you have a different definition for something like, let's say, demi girl or demi boy or something. If you feel like you identify with that, but you have a different definition of it, of what you think it means, please let us know, or what you feel it means, or what it means to you. I keep hearing your phone vibrate, Ranger.
That's not my phone.
Wait, it's not your phone. Whose phone is it?
Yeah, because that's not mine.
We're a professional podcast, everyone.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, I'm actually going to put my phone down here, because I don't know why, if something's vibrating, I'll just leave it down there. Maybe we won't hear it anymore. Maybe it is my phone.
My
I'm
phone's
losing
on
my
my
mind. But yeah.
Okay, then I guess let's talk about, like, so also, before we actually talk about the next thing I was going to bring up, I wanted to state, like, there is a difference between romantic and sexual attraction, which kind of ties into the concept of multiple identities. Because a lot of people are like, you're only gay or straight. You can't be, like, straight and asexual, or, like, aromantic and heterosexual, or, you know, or like pan romantic and asexual, or homo romantic and pansexual, or something like that, you know? Like, I think sexuality and romanticism, I don't feel like that's the right word, but we're gonna go with it, are like 2 completely different things, you know? And like with that, I think sexuality and gender can be fluid, and it is kind of a fluidity type of thing. Sexuality, gender, and like romantic attraction. And so like telling someone their identity is wrong or not a thing isn't really acceptable, even if like that person happens to, like, excuse me, be like heteroromantic, but then their sexuality doesn't necessarily align with that. Like maybe they're asexual, or pansexual, or homosexual. So like maybe they're a guy, they're like a cis man, but they only date women, but they will only have sex with men, or something. Like, that's a thing. And something I don't think we talk about really as a society or like a community, but I knew that is a thing that happens. There are people who are like that. Like for myself, as an example, because I'm the best example, obviously. For me, I identify as like genderqueer, and I use they and them pronouns. And then I identify on the ace spectrum. I say ace spectrum because I feel like I'm in some weird middle ground between like gray and demi-asexual, or like a combination of the two personally. And because like a lot of time for me, if I will not experience sexual desires or attraction to someone unless there is some type of connection there, that being said, I also do catch feelings very easily. But then there's also times where I'm like, I'm actually into the experience of doing the sexual relations regardless of a connection to another, to the person, the like person, masculine presenting person I'm having sex with, or like man I'm having sex with, whatever. And then I also kind of like, I'm technically I guess more on like the homosexual, homo romantic side. Um, but I prefer that using the term androphile, yeah, androphile, because I have attraction more so to masculinity over, I guess, like typical gender norms, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, which I think ties into like just my gender identity a little bit. And then romantic attraction is like a weird thing that I'm still kind of figuring out as of late, to be honest. So, um, and so I guess like when you could argue that there's like conflicting identities, a little bit. Um, and I don't like that term in a way because it's just like you can have any variation on gender or romantic or sexuality, attraction, and all that stuff. Sexuality and gender and romance are not binary, I guess is the best way to put with it. With the exclusion, I guess, of our bisexual and biromantic babes.
Yeah, which I know when us discussing the podcast and everything, we were kind of using the terminology of conflicting. But I, at least personally, I've never meant in the sense of like, if you're this thing, you can't be this other thing.
No, yeah,
But
I know
more in the
that's not what.
sense of like identity wise and self identification of
No.
trying to figure out like, well, I'm this, but I'm also this thing on the complete opposite end of that spectrum. How
Okay,
do
yeah,
they fit together? Because I'm both.
yeah. No, and I think that makes sense, and that was kind of what I was tying into. I think a little bit though too is this the concept that two things don't match is kind of not it's problematic, a problematic thought process, because it's not okay to make someone feel and I know this isn't what you're saying. I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from entirely, which we may talk about later. My thought process is more, it's kind of problematic to try and tell people that, and you end up in situations like some people where it's like someone might be homo romantic and only date men or as a woman, or
Yeah.
only date women as a man, uh but then be asexual or pan romantic or pansexual, or like some type of sexuality that technically quote unquote doesn't line up with their romantic attraction. And that could go for someone who's maybe like a lesbian, like they only like a what like they're homo romantic and only date women, but they're open to having sex with multiple people or just no one in general. That being said, also I guess tying in with asexuality, not all asexuals are not willing to have sex, even though they're straight up asexual. So that was kind of more so what I was getting to, is like
Yeah.
the concept that things just don't line up, I think is kind of problematic, and it's something that mindset I think needs to change, because it's not fair to isolate someone from the LGBT community if they happen to be like heteroromantic and something else that isn't straight.
Yeah.
If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think so. I think it basically comes down to we with all the different types of ways that people can identify now, just everyone needs to be open to the fact that what that looks like is not going to be the same across the board. Which feels kind of ironic. That shouldn't be something that needs to be taught or people educated on, but that's exactly what seems to be part of the issue is like, well, if you don't fit into these specific labels exactly as I perceive them, then there's something wrong, but that's not the case at all.
Yeah, and I mean that comes from the fact that as time has progressed, we've discovered new sexualities and gender identities that people are like they weren't a thing before. I mean, technically, a lot of these were
Were a
things
thing. They just didn't have a name before.
before, or it wasn't okay to be that, so no one really brought it up.
Yes.
Like, I mean, even like the original acronym for the queer community was LGBT. A lot of people just did not accept bisexuality in at all. Like it was always erased, and like there's a lot of bigotry towards like transgender people too. But people are constantly erasing bisexuality and always have been, along with like asexuality and
Yeah.
pansexuality. And pretty much, if you don't fit into like the lesbian or gay category, people get really problematic and are you don't add your sexuality. Yeah, that doesn't exist. Like, sorry, not sorry. um, yeah. Ranger, say something.
Yeah, that's actually the thing that's kind of interesting about the whole thing is the fact of looking at the way even the acronym of LGBT plus, then LGBTIA plus, and just kind of evolution of the acceptance of different identities. The fact that the I and the A weren't initially on there, or IA plus, sorry, wasn't
Yeah.
initially on there, and the fact that to a certain extent, like even the T was questionable, and the B was questionable. Like the fact that there's been this evolution, this improvement, where it seems like there still is a lot to be had. Don't get me wrong, but it's just good to see that there's been that push towards, okay, guys, everyone's included, everyone has their space, everyone's welcome. To some extent, I don't know. I'm rambling. Probably because I'm trying to avoid that next bullet point we have on here, but that's beside the point.
If you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. It is your
No,
choice.
I've been
But
thinking
it's
on it,
the
and we're going to talk about it tonight. But
well, you want to do it now since it technically ties into what we're currently
yeah,
playing.
so it actually ties in really well into this. So
I'm here for you.
So basically, guys, something that Maddie and I have been talking about for actually about a year now, actually. Because I think it was about July I first brought this up as a discussion. Or
Yeah,
something I was trying to figure out.
I think we started talking about it, not necessarily in the what you're about to bring up in general, but kind of going back to like quote unquote conflicting identities is something that
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about throughout the past year, basically. Since like last Pride Month, I think.
So this is something that generally hasn't really got brought up on Steam. On stream.
I mean, technically, you're not wrong.
Hasn't really got hasn't got brought up on Steam either. But I'd be kind of confused how it would on Steam. But on stream on Twitch, it hasn't really got brought up. I see once or twice. I think someone almost let it slip about this, but it got pulled back real quick. But so basically, guys, just prefer to probably about the last year or 2 years, something like that. Something that I've been trying to figure out is kind of where my identity fits into all this. Which is why it's been really funny that basically since we started the multi-streams, one of the kind of ongoing comments and kind of almost a joke of it is I'm basically the only straight person on the team, or on the mod team.
To be fair, I always thought you were queer. I always thought it was Xander, because I always would forget. Like, even before we started talking about this, I was just like, Ranger's queer, right?
I'm curious what made you think I was, but
I
that's
think
very
I always
different...
thought I always thought you were bisexual, to be honest.
Well, alrighty then. No, I'm not coming out as bisexual, guys. No.
I wish, but no. Go
no,
ahead,
so basically something I've been trying to figure out, and I shouldn't actually only say it's been 2 years. It's been a lot longer, but it's only been the last year or two I've really started narrowing down to this and trying to find acceptance in this idea, was the possibility of me of being some form of asexual. Because I've always identified as, here's a mouthful, heterosexual, cisgendered white woman.
I would hope you would identify as a white.
Yeah, I hope so. But as far as my longer definition of myself, that's what it boiled down to. Because I'm cisgendered, heterosexual, what have you. But not going into too much details as to why I was thinking that this was a possibility, but it came up as a topic. Particularly, I think I didn't have the terms for it until actually being in Maddie's community. Don't pat yourself on the back too much, Maddie.
Look, I help people discover their sexualities all the time. Take that as you will.
So, the past year or so has just been a matter of kind of reconciling, is that the case? about a year ago, or a little under a year ago, is actually when we started talking about it. And I spent several months kind of jumping back and forth on it. Even Bodyguard, which for those that don't watch our Twitch streams, Bodyguard is my husband. Um, I only vaguely ever mentioned it to him up until about a month ago, where I finally, for lack of a better term, kind of came out as I'm 99% sure I'm some form of asexual. I'm trying to figure out what kind, if I'm thinking more A or gray ace still. I'm leaning towards gray ace, but it's just been an interesting partial year of trying to kind of put the gloves on, I guess, and see how they're fitting. Like even doing like I literally was doing silly things like using my own hobbies and trying to come to terms with it. Like you might remember this, Maddie, when I went to the convention in September and I bought those gray ace pins.
That's right, because you sent me
Yeah,
I
I
think you
sent
sent me
you.
a rainbow heart, right?
Yeah,
I
something
think,
like that. Yeah. So just
yeah.
trying it on, like even just simple things within my hobbies, incorporating it, and trying to figure out like, does this feel right? Is this a thing? And I think the biggest hurdle I was running into, and I'm still running into, is the fact that even though I'm at the point where I identify as ace or gray ace, I also still identify as heterosexual and heteroromantic and cisgender. Like it feels like my list of identities is getting longer, but it was just.
Tried to beat me, Ranger. Come for my brand.
But it's just trying to come to that like acceptance of being both the asexual and heterosexual, even though internally it has that like how do I be both, even though I know that's totally a thing. It's just trying to reconcile the fact that it's both. They're both there. There's nothing wrong with both being there, and yeah, so there we go. There's my announcement of things I haven't mentioned on stream, that I am asexual, heterosexual, cisgendered.
I'm coming out.
Oh
I
god.
want the world to know. But no, well, yeah, that like comes back to like I think that problematic mindset where it's just like people are like, if you're like in Ranger's case, if you're like heterosexual slash heteromantic, but I also identify as asexual, you don't have a place in the queer community. And I'm like, no, because that's just you erasing someone's sexual identity right there, you know? Just because someone's only willing to have sex of like the opposite gender, but also is asexual in some capacity, does not mean they're any less part of the community than someone else.
Yes.
Is it? It's just like yes, is like Ranger Stronger struggle with like maybe a little. It's like different than like my struggle, even though I identify as asexual. But that's only because I'm only willing to really have sex with someone who is more masculine, or at least I in most cases who is like man presenting or masculine
Yeah.
presenting. And I'm really only attracted to men for the most part, it's a general sense. So yes, we have two different struggles with that, because someone will look at Rangers like, oh, she's just straight. But like, just because that's maybe the case, if she was to tell someone, excuse me, that she was asexual as well, she would have people
Erase
people,
one or the other.
yeah, they'd be like, you can be both, kind of like people in the queer community. You're kind of being bigoted and like homophobic, in my opinion, or acephobic, I guess, technically,
Yeah.
or asexual phobic, whatever you want to call it, in that capacity, where it's just like, just because someone doesn't fit your binary box of what you think queer is versus straight, doesn't erase someone's sexuality and gender. Just because you are being closed-minded doesn't mean you get to erase someone else's identity. Yes. Even again, I don't really care that some people like Ranger are asexual and straight. Like, they're still part of the queer community because they have a sexuality or a gender or romantic attraction that is not part of
The non-LGBT spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. So, don't erase people's sexuality or gender identities and stuff just because you're closed-minded and bigoted is basically my main point. Just because Yes. I'm gonna
Yeah,
keep saying the same thing in different
yeah,
times.
the thing that's been particularly interesting, and I've been doing a lot of self reflection on it, just because I have been trying to figure out for the past year, really hardcore figuring out the last year. In reality, I think I've probably always been some amount of ace. I just, up until now, I kept trying to find excuses for it versus just accepting it is what it is. Because I remember as far back as being like 18, 19 years old, avoiding the topic entirely, being like, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready. We're too young. We're blah, 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 blah. Even moving a couple years forward, where I'm like, well, it's probably my medication is the problem. Because I was on medication because I was epileptic. Which, surprise, surprise, a side effect of that is lowered libido and sexual attraction and things of that nature. So it's like, it's clearly just a medicine. The reality is, it probably would never was. So just kind of coming to those terms, and then knowing like, especially since with all the discussions we've had over the past year, almost 2 years
Mm-hmm.
of just having that. I actually wrote it down as imposter syndrome, like feeling like there's a certain sense of I clearly don't belong there, but I know I do, but I don't feel like I do. Like,
That's like the general definition of imposter syndrome, right? Like you feel like you are somewhere where you don't
don't
belong.
belong. Yeah.
Okay. I forget what that means all the time. And
Yeah, it's really just feeling like you're literally just pretending to be the thing that you're being, even though you actually are the thing you are.
Okay, that makes a lot more. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like a lot of people get that, like, just because, like, again, I think there's a lot of people who end up in that category, and like, I mean, I think that's something that happens a lot of the time with like people who are queer in some capacity, but like, I feel like that happens a lot actually with people who are bisexual or pansexual, actually, especially because people on both sides of the spectrum, like straight or queer, like to
Or like
erase.
pick a side.
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel like they end up in a similar situation with that too. And then anyone who's asexual probably ends up with that situation too, because asexuality is another sexuality that gets removed a lot, and people who have different romantic attractions relative to their sexuality, that is even probably more prevalent, because most people don't see sexuality and romantic attraction as like kind of like two different things, but I see it kind of as where sexuality and gender are two completely different things, or sex and genitalia doesn't match someone's gender identity. Basically, your like birth sex and your gender are like two different things. Like one's up in your gender's in your head, sexual sex is in your pants, kind of.
Yeah.
Like you may be biologically a female at birth, assigned female at birth, but you might be a man. You might be a trans man or a man. Excuse me. And I think that just like I think a lot of people end up feeling like they have an imposter syndrome because, especially, there's so much self-hatred for people within the queer community if you don't fit a specific part of the community. It's like, oh, you're not gay, lesbian, or trans? Well, sorry, not sorry. And even transgender people have a lot of hate within the community, especially from white gays. I say white gays in the sense of white lesbians and white gay men who constantly are devaluing transgender men and women. Constantly. It's a really big issue, and also bisexuality.
Yeah, which is why, like, even earlier, like I said, like, things have improved from where they were originally, but there's still a very long way to go, especially in terms of, like, transgender identities being acceptance, not even touching on the human rights issues currently being figured out currently in the US, at least, I should say.
I mean, it depends also. Like, I mean, we have a different set of issues that we're focusing on now within the U.S., but I mean, like, gender, like, queer identity, like, queer issues are still so prevalent in so many countries, especially in the Middle East. The fact that people get killed for something they literally can't control. Just it completely and utterly baffles me, whether that's your race or your sexuality, like, or gender identity. I just think it's ridiculous. It's so stupid. Like, let's just push all the bigots onto an island and let them figure themselves out. Like, you're a bigot, you get this island, and you
everyone
just
else
stay
gets the rest.
Yeah, we all get the rest of the country, and you guys y'all get your little box of an island, and you have to make it work. There's too many people on this one island. Well, maybe you should have figured that out before you decided to be a big, and that was a mess of a sentence.
Good
Uh,
job.
I'm doing great. Um, and then like to go into more, I guess like kind of an imposter syndrome since we're on the topic a little bit. LGBT, being a community person of LGBT descent, why did I say it like that? And also being religious, because that's a really, really big issue, especially like if you're like Catholic, like any religion really.
Yeah.
Well, not like Wiccan or and stuff like along those lines, but or like Wiccanism and Satanism.
Yeah.
Like those are like two like very small I feel like, well, and like old religions like Norse and Greek mythology and stuff like, or not mythology, that's not
Yeah.
the word I wanted. I can't remember the word I wanted, but yeah, but like Judaism, Christianity, Catholicism, Islam. Is it Islam, or is that a
Yeah.
race? No, it's a religion.
It's religion.
Islam. Hi, I know words. Hi. Like that's a huge issue. Especially I think Islam's actually of those four I listed, I think is like the worst. I think right now, foreign mostly because the Middle East has a huge issue with queer people. Like I constantly keep seeing things of people who are killed and like hung and pushed off buildings for just being queer in some capacity that happen to live in the Middle East. Which but yeah, so I mean that's a whole thing itself though too. Is like so many like people will kill themselves because the way that churches or mosques label queer people, and like it's a sin, but your judgment isn't. But so many people will kill themselves. Like I remember when I was younger, my aunt told me a story. I think one of her friends or something, someone she was really close to, killed himself like on the steps of his church. Like he shot himself because he couldn't live with being a gay man and also being faithful to his religion. He found the sin of killing himself not as bad as living the life of
Of a
quote
gay
unquote
man.
sin. Yeah, exactly, because of the way that churches and religions have labeled queer people.
And that to
Uh,
me is hideously horrifying
mhm.
that there are churches out there, because I don't want to say the religions themselves necessarily, but certain sex of these religions that drive people to do things like that because they feel like they have no other options, or they would be better off, or the world would be better off if they did. And that's horrifying to me.
No, it's a really rough situation, and it's something I mean I'm not religious, but that was something that when I was a little young queer, before I actually came out and was like really fully accepting myself, especially because of things that happened to me when I was younger. It caused a lot of self doubt and issues that because it's not like I grew up in a family or where queerness or anything like that was seen as bad. I mean, my uncle has made some very problematic comments about drag queens and also transgender babes, transgender people, but that's a completely different issue that I only would, yeah, anyways. Um, but for me, when you're young, especially when I was growing up, when I feel like it was way more common. It's not like it's not uncommon now, but it was a lot more common for families to completely reject their queer children. Like it was like really bad when I was like in middle school and in high school, and it's slowly gotten better. Still not great. Like it's still really bad. But I
Yeah.
was really scared that I would get rejected by my family if I was queer, and so for a while I tried to fight it, and I even like a lot of queer people apparently go through this. I went through like a lightweight homophobic phase that my mother shot down immediately. She put me in my place right away,
Nice.
and I think that was actually the moment for me where I was like, okay, you know what? it isn't bad to be queer. And I know for myself, like I remember at the moment questioning my sexuality and like actually coming to terms with it, I was on this like chat, like virtual chat reality thing that I used to go time when I was younger at MBU, and ended up in a random chat with this one dude, and he was just like, "Are you bisexual?" And I was like, "No, I'm straight." And then I was just like, something about that like made me question everything. And like he had a photo of him, like an actual photo of himself and on his avatar on his profile, and I was like, "Oh, he's really cute." And I was like, "Wait a minute,
It's like,
wait a
that ain't
minute."
a very straight thing to say.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I mean, like you can be straight and admit like another man or like another woman is attractive. Like that is a thing. Like you can respect
Oh,
someone's
yeah.
beauty of attracted to them. But I was just like, it was like, wait a minute. And then I like started questioning it a lot. I was like, maybe I am bisexual. And then it turned into, I'm a flaming homosexual. No, and then like, especially with like everything I was going through, it like caused so much self-doubt for myself. It's hard. Like, even if you're not religious, it's really hard sometimes to come out, especially when you have things that happen to you. Most people are like, oh, you're gay, that happened to you. It's like, no, not how that actually works. If anything, that might account for my asexuality. If any, because I personally feel like asexuality is like a thing that
Yeah.
does, like, can vary on why someone's asexual for a number of reasons. Um, and for me, I do feel like what happened to me kind of is part of the reason why I am on the A spectrum personally. But yeah, I don't know. I know that like kind of got off topic thing, but it's just like I just know it's a lot. It's a common thing to happen of like these like not wanting to live anymore as a queer person because how society, or at least how, well, I mean, still for the most part, how a lot of society portrays queerness as unnormal or just not normal or not okay, even though it's completely natural and seen in many other species, not just the human race. Um, it's something that's a lot worse for people who are religious. Like I've seen stories of like people who kill themselves because they believing that their sexuality is wrong and they have to smother it, basically. Which is how you end up in certain situations. I feel like when you, I mean, like it probably would have happened regardless, but it's probably part of the reason why you hear a priest, doing very
Horrifying things
unholy
to
things.
children, or.
Yeah, which I mean, they're gonna do it in probably a
Which that comes
pedophile.
into its own set of issues. But yeah, and this
Yeah.
doesn't even touch on the horrifying things other people have done to people in the LGBT or the queer community.
Oh
Like
yeah,
like
all
the
the
discussion we
deaths
had a
and stuff
couple
like that.
weeks ago about the one individual who had been murdered horribly, that the first
Matthew
scene
Shepard.
in It was based off of.
Oh yeah, that one. That I still get flashbacks from that, and it was a movie. I can't even imagine what, because that was based off a real story. I can't even imagine what it must have been like for the gay person who died, his partner, after watching all that.
Yes.
Because obviously his boyfriend didn't actually die from a clown. His boyfriend died from his injuries and not and drowning because he was incapacitated and then thrown into the river. I can't even imagine what it'd be like to watch that as a queer person,
Yeah.
seeing someone you love get murdered like that in front of your eyes, because just watching it from a movie, like I've always been really sensitive to queer bashing as someone who is very gay. Like it's very obvious I'm homosexual because of stereotypes. Like I'm very flamboyant. I
Yes.
always have a rainbow bracelet on my arm. I don't care if I'm gay, but it's something that I have always been very afraid of. Even growing up in California, it was always something that I'm like, someone, if they just looked at me, if I looked at like a random dude wrong or something, or made him have an inkling that I was checking him out, even if I wasn't, I could get beat up. Like
Yeah.
it's a thing. I will say that's less common, significantly less common in California. It's still a thing, especially if you're transgender. But yeah, and it's awful. And then you have like Matthew Shepard and I I'm blanking on names right now. I'm blanking so hard on names.
There's just been too many.
There's been
Either
way
way.
too many, and especially as of late, I keep everything. It feels almost like every week there's at least one new transgender woman murdered. Like I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head, but there was two transgender women, I think last week actually, that were
I was
found
gonna say,
murdered.
wasn't there some really recently, like the last week or two?
There were two different black women, transgender women, who were murdered, and one of them was found, I believe, in a river or off the on the banks of a river or something like that. If I'm remembering this correctly, please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And also, if you remember their names, please put them in the comments, or I might put a blurb of their names on the screen or something. She was found, I think, with her fucking leg was cut off. Actually, oops, I swore. Oh well.
Yeah,
And
we're
like
far enough in. We're
brutally
good.
beat. We're good. We're fine. We're like 40 minutes in. Oh, actually, we are 40 minutes in. Um, but no, and it's disgusting that like stuff like this is still happening today. It's like 2020. We shouldn't be having
We
to
shouldn't be
fight
going through
for,
this where people have to fear for their lives because of their identities.
yeah, because of their gender, sexual identities, their race, which is even more bullshit to me. Because at least like with like sexuality and gender, to an extent, you can kind of hide that depending on the type of person you are, or
Yeah.
I don't like this term, but how quote unquote passing you are.
Like, case in
You know,
point, the fact that someone talking or looking at me, they're probably just gonna see, like, I'm married to a cisgendered man, and I'm a
mhm.
cisgendered woman, so clearly I'm heterosexual.
Yeah, and then someone looks at me and is like, I'm white, so I'm not gonna get beat up for being white, but I'm very, like I said already, I'm someone will probably look at me and is like, you gay as shit, I'm gonna beat you up. And I'm like, can we not? Like, we could just like
Yeah,
not. I've had enough trauma for one lifetime. Can we not add something else to it, please
yeah,
and thank
please
you?
no.
Like I'm Gucci. Surprisingly, I haven't had any issues really in living in the South, even though I'm moving like in a month. But like, you know, I'm like very surprised. I live in a very small town in the South right now in Virginia, and pleasantly surprised, especially since there are a lot of people with Trump stickers and Confederate flags that live in this town. Um, love that. Oh God. Oh my God. Oh, hello, coming. We kind of touched on that a little bit, didn't we?
Yeah, we kind of been jumping all over the place because a lot of it all kind of feeds into each other, but just like. Actually, let's jump a little bit more into just the general idea of coming out and everything. So, like, with you, it was I envy you.
Yeah,
Like, kind
sorry.
of where did it go from there for you?
Ooh, baby. So I ended up, I guess, kind of dating this one dude that I met through IMVU. Hi, but I probably was catfish, but you know what? No one wants to date me IRL, so what's up, boys? So slide into my DMs. But no, in reality, no, because I did technically start dating this one dude. And it was a kind of a long distance thing. Well, I mean, it was a long distance thing, whatever. And he was my emo sweetheart in middle school. I'm gonna I'll escort myself out of the building. But no, and so I ended up coming out. Okay, so this is gonna, I'm a little frustrated by my coming out. I'm gonna say that now. Now, since I'm being weird. Hi, my name's Maddie Q. I'm a dumbass. Uh, but no, okay, so first I came out to someone I thought was a really close friend at the time, and I think this was my 8th grade year. I think is when I started questioning my sexuality. Yeah, it was my 8th grade year when I started questioning like my sexuality, that, and also kind of my gender identity. But we'll talk about that. I've come out multiple times. Hi. But when I came out with gay, I originally came out to this one girl who I thought I was friends. We were like really close friends with, and then somehow, and I like told like a couple of people I was close to. I but somehow after I told this one girl, and she wasn't like the first person I told, she was just like asking me about it, and I was like, no, whatever. No, I'm not gonna try to even lie to her. Um, Shortly after, basically the whole school knew, and I was like, I didn't go to a small middle school. I actually went to one of the, I think the largest, or at least the best middle school in my area. And I was just like, how the hell does everyone know? And I was like, oh, this bitch. I didn't confront her about it because I didn't really care too much at the time. But I ended up realizing later, I was like, oh, yeah, it kind of negatively affected me. Because coming out is such a personal experience. You don't get to take that away from someone. And if you haven't yet, honestly, I'd recommend watching Love, Simon. They handle, like, coming out, I think, very well. And I felt
Yeah.
I relate to Simon so much since his coming out was also ruined for him. Spoiler. Sorry if you haven't watched the movie yet, but it's kind of older.
I was gonna
So,
say it's been out for a
um,
while now, but
it's been out for one watched it. I'm sorry, not sorry. Um, so it was like because there was this one day I remember in PE. It's like what I have this. It's such a vivid because it was like kind of a lightweight traumatizing experience. Nothing really came from it, but we were changing what we were changing into uniform into forms out of them, but it doesn't matter.
yeah.
I was in smaller section because like there was a huge part of the locker room area, a wall separated a little smaller section from the larger section. I had a smaller section in like the corner. Um, and so I was like, very much so. There, I had no quick way to leave that situation. There's one of the seventh graders was like, "Hey Matthew, so I heard you're dating a guy from school," and everyone in that entire section just stopped and stared at me. Everyone stopped talking and looking at me. And
What?
that was when I was like kind of actually talking to someone, and I guess technically dating his boyfriend.
Oh no.
And I was like, I just kind of froze for half a second because I was just like, I wasn't really ashamed of being gay or anything. Like, that was I come to the point that I was gay. But it was just kind of a situation. It's like, I'm in a locker room with a bunch of dudes. I think he was in his office. I don't fully remember where he was. I didn't know where the teacher was. And so I'm kind of just like, I was afraid because it's just like I don't know how to react, and so I just watched, and then everyone just went back to what they were doing. Awkward, love that for me. Um,
It's so.
and no, it was scary. It was really fucking scary because I was just like, I don't know how they were going to
Well,
react. I have no idea what
and
could have happened.
especially in that kind of delicate of a location.
Hmm, I could have got up. They were home. See, if a year later I found out most of the guys who were in that one area with me happened to like by don't know if that was actually, but that's what I heard from friends I have and graders, and then obviously when I graduated and went to high school,
Yeah.
like they were on was like for me. Oh, now I'm remembering another thing I really fucking regret, but I have no way. Like, there's like a possible I fucked up, but I've done that a lot. Without the discussed. And then with my family, actually. So that coming out experience was also taken away from me. Hi, my out was just basically not my
Wow.
choice, with like small exceptions. Like I came out to like my clothes around the tie. One one of them I found out. I'm like 90% sure because I told prior to that, and it was like a day or two after I came out to the one girl I mentioned. Do not remember her name. We'll call her Alice because why not?
Yeah.
After I told Alice, and that was like a couple days later was when I was quiet in the locker room, and I was like, oh, fuck her.
Dang, man.
But family, I came out to my cousin, and she was so happy and like exciting and like
Yeah.
nice because from a small town in Michigan, which is the north, so it's a blue state.
Yeah.
I think blue state at least. But anyways, it's the north, accepting, but still, my family comes from a small. I was really how my family general sense who was from there. My cousin, to make her job to tell. I mean, pretty most of my family that like she told grandmothers out there for sure, and then she told my and from there everyone family was talking about it, and my aunt that she found out from one of my grandma found out from my cousin. I was just like I to my family. I at least with my friends and like the school, I was able to come out to a couple of my come out on my own terms, reckless, but I was so much more upset at me because that is way more terrifying. Like bullying stuff, I could have dealt with it. I had gone to school a little bit.
Yeah.
Something I could have dealt. That would have sucked, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like so terrible, like what my family was going to do, and family was actually super accepting. No one of my family rejected me whatsoever, which was really nice. I actually had my aunt tell my grandfather I was gay because I was so afraid. Because I used to be a lot closer to him now. I was terrified of how of him. Everyone, included, both when we were talking, we thought he was going to be like really bigoted and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Ended up out, told him, and she was like, he had no issue. He had literally zero issue. He was so supportive about it. We found out when my aunt told him that he's actually super liberal. Like my grandpa, like his 70s or 80s or something like that. So freaking weird.
Wow.
I'm on Facebook talking to Republicans and stuff. Like that's my grandpa. That's my grandpa. But I love him. Um, but no, it's just like really weird. So like it was nice that like I got accepting environment from my family, but it's just kind of like don't get to take someone's coming experience from,
Yeah.
especially because you don't know how someone will react. It is not fair to put someone in that uncomfortable situation. And coming out is such a personal experience. You don't get to decide their experience for that, regardless of how you identify. It's so messy.
Yeah.
Coming out of the personal experience, you don't get to do that. If someone confides in you about their gender identity, you get to hold on to that. You get to not talk about it to anyone, except for them. They'll talk. Like when I asked my aunt to tell my grandfather I was gay, I asked her to, so she did. She was not going to do permission. She was not going to do that because she understands that is not her place.
Yeah.
Unless she was asked, which I asked her because she asked me if she wanted me to because I was so afraid of letting them know, and I was like, yes, please. So, yeah,
It's like, yes, please do the scary thing for me.
do the scary thing. I'm afraid about my papa's.
Yeah, and I
I
think
don't want to.
like for me, like my family and like literally none of our friends outside of obviously like you and Shy and all of our close local friends,
Mm-hmm.
and none of them know. Literally only Bodyguard does. Because I haven't mentioned it to any of our friends, any of our family, or anything. I don't know if I necessarily will or not. We'll see. I'm kind of jury's still out on that.
You're not
'Cause-
required to either.
yeah,
That's the other thing about coming out. Is like, if you
yeah,
don't want to tell someone, you don't
yeah.
have to. Like I was talking to this one dude, and then we started talking again, and then he started ghosted me again. So I'm done with him. But like I know he's not open to his family about it, but that's just because like he's just like my family doesn't need to know everything about. Okay, like
Okay.
okay.
But yeah, no, like I don't know what my family's response would truly actually be. I've never really like because we've talked before about like people being gay, lesbian, transgender, but we've never really discussed all the other ones like asexual and poly and all the others just because it's never came up. So I don't necessarily know where they would stand on them. But
And
even
something you
just
can always bring up passively, not necessarily about yourself. Just see if you can weasel into a conversation that like just to see how they think about it, even if you don't want to
yeah,
actually open up to them about it
yeah.
too.
So I might do that just to kind of feel out like what is your guys, like even talking to Bodyguard when I finally because we ended up sitting down just to talk about a couple different things and it was relevant. I'll leave it at that, but actually just bringing it up to him, it was like,
Yeah.
oh god, like especially considering what I don't want to say a fundamental part of the relationship sexual attraction plays because that isn't always the case,
Mm-hmm.
but just the fact that it can make a fundamental difference in how our relationship needs to function when we're already in an established relationship and married and everything else. It's like, oh god, what is this gonna do?
Yeah, but he was really accepting and open to it, though, wasn't he? Like he seems like, in general, whenever you try to talk to him about things and like educate him, he normally seems like really receptive. I guess is the
Yeah,
best way to put it.
generally he is like we've had discussions where it's like sweetie, no, no, but overall
Athletic.
he's a really no he's legitimately just a really good guy. But in talking about it and kind of some of the, for lack of a better term, the difficulties it's gonna bring up or has brought up, because it's brought up some difficulties which I think we can start working past now that I've actually accepted what's causing it instead of trying to look for every scapegoat on the planet for it instead.
Me.
But we ended up just having a really good discussion about like what does that look like why, what like how
Mhm.
can we kind of work with that rather than against it. Which of course
Murder.
we still don't have answers to that necessarily because it's going to be an ongoing process. But like
Mhm.
even with no, like because I figured he'd respond well, but that was still a scary thing to bring up. Like
Exactly. I mean, anything can be scary, even if you pretty much know what the outcome's going to be,
yeah.
Plus,
Like I
I mean,
imagine it
a lot.
wasn't nearly as scary as like what you went through, especially since you had to go through it twice and traumatically no less. Like I
Oh my
feel really
God, that's
lucky in the fact that
great.
I got to pick when I brought it up to Bodyguard. And
Yeah,
even with this podcast,
you got to
I
choose
made
to
the
do it.
decision I'm going to do it this way, with this
I mean, I
method.
did a bold note for it, so you couldn't avoid
Avoid
it,
it.
but you could have avoided it.
Yes. And I know, like, you put that in there, we were, like, laughing about it, but it was honestly a thing. I decided I was going to do this, even if I'm scared to do this. Thank you. Thank you. What,
You're
viewers, what
welcome.
you don't see is I'm looking at the Google Drive of the file for today, and they just had to take Ranger being both ace and hetero and made it, like, 0.500 font.
It was 0.96. Don't you lie to the people. I think both of our coming out experience, though they're vastly different. Actually, I feel like shows like this, like three of the big steps that I like. You like when it comes to coming out is like you need to have self reflection. You have to accept yourself, and then at that point, once you've accepted yourself and you've reflected on yourself with your gender or sexual identity and how you're feeling, you have to then think about it like, am I ready to come out to people, and I think that was something that, well, I was completely stolen from me, but Ranger got to do it, and that's great.
It's like, sucks for you, but at least I got it my way. No, I'm kidding,
Exactly,
I'm
at least
kidding.
one of us was happy.
I just think it's this funny timing that I picked Pride Month to bring it up.
I mean, it was bound to happen when we were like Pride Month is all queer topics. We have to start researching. Anyways,
But I think it just ended up being kind of a natural progression of since we were going to be talking about this as a topic for it,
yeah.
it's like why not bring it up when that's the topic anyway? So let's just get
And
it
like it's
out there.
important. It's like really important too. I think to come out if it's something you feel like you need to do, because it's important to fully. It's important to come out, or at least to come out to yourself, if not more people, so you can start to live your true self, even if
Yes.
you have to kind of hide that to an extent,
Yeah.
which happens when you're younger and you're out to yourself and maybe like close friends and stuff. If you're not in a situation to actually come out to your family. But it's just important to be honest with yourself. All you're going to do by forcing yourself to not accept who you are and come out to yourself, and then it cause a lot of low self-esteem and self-hatred and all this other stuff. Like, I know for me, like, I mean, partially it was weight loss, but also accepting. I've noticed, because it was about a year ago, actually. It was like, I think actually last July when I like fully came out, or it might have been last summer, last June. But anyways, that was when I came out as like gender queer, and that was actually when I'm actually coming out to that how I want. Like, that isn't, luckily my gender queerness isn't getting taken away from me, and I'm trying to do slow things to come out with that passively, because I'm just really anxious about telling like family that, hi, I identify as gender queer, please use they and them pronouns with me, mostly with my uncle, because of like, I don't remember what it was, but I just remember really like old, pretty transphobic comment when I was younger and like was coming out as gay. I cannot remember what the hell it was for the life of me. I just remember it was like really problematic.
Yeah.
But I noticed, like, for me, like, again, my self-esteem, I noticed, has been progressively getting better as like I accepted my gender identity and the pronouns I prefer to use. It's a really good motivational, like, confidence
Yeah.
boost when you come to terms with your own sexuality, your gender identity, and like, no, you tell yourself, I am normal. This is okay. It's uncommon, but I am normal.
Yeah, and even like to me, like doing this podcast and part of the reason why I was so anxious just to get it done. Like I don't want to say get it done and over with because I don't want it to sound like it's a chore or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I definitely noticed like the last 2 or 3 months, more particularly with our multi streams, I noticed
Mhm.
this. But even sometimes, just some of my discussions with Bodyguard, it almost seemed like me being some variation of Ace became the elephant in the room. If that makes any sense.
I see that point. We'll say
Like, it was
earlier in the
there,
year we
I
were
know
both
it's
drinking too
there,
much.
but let's pretend it's not there, but it's there. So, like,
I mean, I see your point, but I also, for me personally, I never even thought, especially since we were drunk a lot for like the first few months of
yeah, I
this
know,
year.
really. So, like, just the fact of, like, having this be a thing where it's like, okay, this is out in the open now, to whatever limited
It's
amount that's going
time
to be. I don't know how
out.
many people are going to watch this podcast. Hopefully, a lot.
I'm gonna laugh at this one
If this
just.
one blows up and it's like, well, there we go, guys.
It's like
but
I'm coming out.
but even
I want
just
the world to. I'm sorry, I'll leave.
but even like coming out with it to Bodyguard, and then now that this is going to be released in a couple days, so like it's not going to be a hidden thing on Twitch anymore. I don't have to pretend it's not a thing on Twitch. I know I'll eventually get to a point where I'm not going to be hiding it like on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Like I'm not going to be hiding it anymore. And
Let's
even
just dye
just
your
the
hair
little
beige.
bit of like it finally openly being like, okay, this is reality. Like this is what it is.
Yeah.
And still it almost took a weight off.
Yeah, and at least you know too that, like, because we have a bullet point about like some concerns and stuff about coming out. One of which is like rejection from friends and family. Like, at least you know that even if you have like some family that's like, no, you're a sinner for not having sex or not
It's
liking
like,
sex. You at least like your husband is accepting and loves you
yes.
regardless, and you have like a group of friends that still loves and supports
Yeah.
you. We didn't. That'd be really confusing since literally pretty much all of us are asexual in some capacity. That would just be really, really weird. Hello, ace.
Yeah, and interestingly,
We stick together.
even within our local friend group, a lot of them actually are somewhere along the LGBT spectrum, which was
Yeah.
completely accidental, and I
We talked
don't
about the
actually
mod
know
group a
how
lot.
that happened, but yeah, most of them fall somewhere.
Well, because I know there's like literally everyone in like the mod group, which if you are confused, I call them my like close my close group of friends is like basically my moderators at this point on Twitch.
Oh,
And literally every single one of us is queer in some
yeah,
capacity.
no.
Like all of us are. Like Rangers are is
Yeah, now we can officially say basically all of us because
literally all of us. Like you're like you, Barb, Shy, all identify as asexual, and then Shy and Barb also identify as panromantic.
yeah, I was the last
Emily is
holdout.
figuring herself out, but she's like bisexual or pansexual, and I think she also identifies on the A spectrum. Kendall's bisexual. Mouse is queer. And then I'm queer as fuck. Like literally just within like that like group of friends. Like we're every
Yeah,
single one of us
like
is queer.
legitimately, I was the last holdout for being able to admit that. Yeah, I'm somewhere along the line, somewhere.
I
Just
stand by. I just until we actually started talking about it, I was convinced you were bisexual. I
it's so
don't know
funny to me
why.
because I don't know why.
I don't either. It was just like, and my brain was just like, Ranger's bisexual. We never talked about it, but she's bisexual. I think my brain, you know how most people default to straight? I
Yeah,
think my brain defaults to bisexual. Or like, I don't know why. My brain is just like, you're bisexual until I'm proven wrong, unless it is an attractive guy, in which case you were straight until I'm proven wrong.
Then
Or at
again,
least you're not interested.
I'm also one of the only mods that tends to crack jokes about like slightly off the cuff, risky
Yeah,
jokes about both men and women. So maybe that's where it came from too.
okay, yeah, that's a fair point too. And also I guess like with coming out to like if you do not know for sure that you're in a situation that won't lead to rejection or like abuse or something or along those lines or to you being kicked out of your house, and you don't have the way to support yourself or you don't have somewhere to go, it's honestly not worth coming out until you're in a place
And a
of
safe place to do so.
exactly. Like, if you have to wait until you're able to move out and support yourself, it sucks, but you might have to do that. It's really important to make sure you're in a safe environment because you don't want to end up in a situation where you either get kicked out or your parents or like someone in your household starts abusing you when you come out, because
Yeah.
those are things that happen all the time. You hear stories all the time of like queer kids and stuff, or even adults who come out but
Yeah.
are still living with their parents or like a guardian, and they start getting abused or get kicked out of their house, and then they're homeless because they live with bigots, you know?
Yeah, they live with people that suck. Like,
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, also your life. I forgot to get the stats for it specifically, but your life
expectancy.
expectancy, that word, that really long word, even though it's not that long a word, drops as a queer person, especially when you're a trans person, and I think especially more so if you're a trans person of color, drops even more. And so that's something else to like really take in consideration. Which, I mean, there's not a lot you can do. You shouldn't be afraid to come out just because you
Yeah.
know our life
Expectancy.
that stupid word drops as queer people. You know, it sucks. It really sucks, and this shouldn't be a thing. But you also shouldn't be afraid of being yourself because a
Other people
bigot,
suck.
because other people suck. Although it is a thing, the gay trans panic defense is a thing, and if you don't know what that is, basically in I think most states, I don't remember what states off the top of my head, but I think if I remember
I
correctly,
know there was
most,
several of them this applied to.
I think it's 30 something. I feel like it was like 30 something states in America, mostly southern states. Basically saying that someone can plead gay or trans panic defense for killing a queer person, and basically get out of a hate crime murder, um
Based off
because
they panicked because the individual
was queer
queer.
in some capacity. And the fact that that's even a thing still, it's
Is
honestly
horrifying.
disgusting.
Like, how is that a thing?
The fact that it was ever a thing is gross, but the fact that it's still a thing is even more disgusting, to be honest. Like, I don't get it.
And then that's not even getting into, like, the current discussion, more, or I shouldn't say current, but more recent. Well, I guess it is current. Discussion around, like, medical care.
I think actually the Supreme Court, if I remember seeing stuff that the Supreme Court actually repealed the bill that Trump tried to pass, or technically pass, and the Supreme Court was like,
It's like, nope.
nope. Because Trump tried passing a thing where transgender people could be denied medical service based off personal beliefs or whatever it was, or
Yeah.
religious beliefs, whatever the hell it was. And the Supreme Court was like, what if you
Didn't do that.
And now this is all recent, and the Supreme Court, so they was like, no, that's not a thing. Transgender people are still protected in all states, nationally, medically, it doesn't matter. And now transgender, like queer people, cannot be fired anywhere in the country for
being queer. Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay,
I was like,
Court.
thank you, Supreme Court.
Supreme Court is like, it's Pride Month.
But
no,
like,
that means more rights.
But the thing that's horrible to me is the fact it's 2020, the year of Pandora's box, and that still is a debate. Like, how is medical care, non-discrimination in hiring and firing, like, how are these still debates? I don't understand how they're still debates.
Because the world sucks. Like, that's what it comes down to. Honestly, I'm just waiting for the next global issue to happen, because, well, I mean, I shouldn't say global, because Black Lives Matter is central in America, even though there's protests, but, like, you know, every month or every other month, it's just like
another tragedy.
A new thing is added onto what is currently happening. Like, it's not like all the other stuff just isn't a thing anymore. It's just everything is just happening.
Snowballing into each other, and it
Although
sucks.
I think the killer bees are non-existent anymore. I think those have gone somewhere that is not trying to kill America.
Good, good. At least you don't have to worry about killer bees.
Yes, I'm just like, it's halfway through June. Is it just the protest for June? Because actually, the protests did start at the end of May, so I think a lot of people are considering the protest the June month thing.
Yeah.
I've lost track. So many things have happened. Like, literally every month was something new. Or, what it really was is, like, every month was something new, technically, but it was, like, it started at, like, the end of the month prior, so it was mostly affecting the month it went into. So technically the fires, I think actually the fires started Janus. Those started in the new year, but then after that, everything was, like, end of January, but
just a it's been a snowball of a year where it's just been boom, 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 boom. Man, and we're only halfway through the year, guys. I mean,
what's next? And that means next week is going to be something new, probably. Because next week it's the last week in June. If we don't get something new, does that mean the world's finally turning around. I'm like, can something good actually happen? I mean, some stuff good is happening. Like the protests are actually making things change. Like Confederate flags are starting to be banned throughout the nation. Like they're
Confederate statues are being torn down or moved into museums or places where they actually should be instead of memorialized in town squares.
I mean, I don't think the statues should be a thing in general, but like I guess having them in a museum is better than having them.
Yeah, at least a museum, it's for educational purposes versus putting them somewhere where it's honoring them.
Depends how the museum goes about it, though.
That's true.
To be fair, because the museums could go around and make them look so mighty, even though like I don't think we should be showing them at all, at least not in the statue form, but melt the statue down and turn it into something else. That's my opinion on it. Melt the damn thing down and then turn it into... Yes.
But yeah,
anyways, that was completely off topic.
Yeah, we went totally off the rails, up and away.
I mean, you shouldn't expect anything less from us. I mean, to be fair, we also I think we basically covered everything we wanted to talk about though in this podcast though too. So
yeah, basically just to kind of summarize the entire podcast here, since I know we're running a little bit long again, as we seem to like to do.
Shorter than last week.
This is only the second time, but we seem to like to run long.
Shorter than last week.
Overall, guys, when it comes to your identities and what are identities, and just identities in general, I'm trying to think how to put this. Just kind of being compassionate towards others, understanding that people's identities are their identities. Their identities aren't going to be yours, aren't going to be mine, aren't going to be Maddie's. Everyone's is their own. Otherwise, they wouldn't really be called identities anymore. And
don't be a bigot.
And we all have our own journeys, our own paths, how we get there. Like Maddie got there a lot sooner than I did, but not in a good way. Necessarily.
Don't push someone off a cliff with their identities as well.
But versus mine, where it's taken me a long time. I'm in my 30s figuring this out, but I'm getting there in a way I feel is relatively healthy, and I'm picking my way of going through it. I haven't had someone interfere like Maddie did. Just going through this, especially if you're someone who's trying to kind of figure out what is your identity. This isn't even necessarily something just particularly unique to just sexual identities or romantic identities or gender identities, just your identities in general. Just being gentle with yourself, doing that self-reflection. Because if you can accept yourself, that's going to make it so much easier and so much better for you. But it may not be something that happens in one day. It may take you days, weeks, months, in my case, years to get there. But you'll get there. It's just... sometimes they'll take a little bit of work.
And regardless of how long it takes you to accept yourself and figure out yourself, it doesn't devalue your sexuality or gender identity or your romantic identity. Your identity is yours to discover and react how you want. But down the line, you shouldn't just continue lying to yourself. If you know you're different, and you're in a situation that you can't come out, you should do it. Because your identity is important and it will just help you. Even if it's hard in the moment, it'll still be beneficial to you to come out. And I think that kind of what Ranger said on top of what said, honestly, I think is a really big summary of what this is just of what this episode of our podcast is about, just self-reflection, acceptance, and identities. Like your identity is your make it what you want type of thing.
Yes.
And don't hide your true self.
Yeah, don't let someone else have that power over your identity.
Exactly. Well, on that note, I think we're all out of time for this episode. If Ranger agrees.
Yes, I think we've ran a little bit long, but that's okay.
It's a podcast. What's long, really? But if you guys did enjoy this video, podcast episode, whatever you guys are on YouTube, I should say on YouTube. Still didn't upload the first podcast on anything with YouTube. And make sure you leave a like on this video. Hit that bell notification so you get notified whenever we post a new video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Did I say that already? Also, drop a comment down below. Again, I think I asked this earlier, but you guys have different opinions about some of the labels we talked about or identities we talked about earlier. Please let us know what they are, or if there's anything you think we missed. And yeah, just maybe let us know what your coming out story was in the comments and all that good stuff. But we'll see you in the next video.
Yes, see you
Bye-bye.
next time. Bye.